Hard Knocks is doing something new with their in-season show this year. It'll have the whole AFC North on it. That obviously includes the Bengals. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm Jake Lisco. He's James Rapine. We're the Locked On Bengals podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day here on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Today, we're going to be breaking down the most recent news concerning the team, which is that they will be featured as one of 4 teams on Hard Knocks. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase of tickets. Terms apply. For all the new people out there, you can subscribe to the show if you want to stay up to date on the Bengals this offseason. We're a pretty good one-stop shop for that. In fact, I would argue the best one-stop shop for staying up to date on all things Bengals news and analysis throughout the offseason. And like I said, the biggest news this week, James, is likely to be following T. Higgins signing his franchise tag, which we talked about in our most recent show, the Bengals being part of this AFC North edition of In-Season Hard Knocks 2024.
Ooh, big news. I got to be honest. I've never watched the In-Season Hard Knocks. Never done it. Never done it. Never felt compelled to. Now, part of it is, and it goes hand in hand with what you just said, when you're a one-stop shop for the Bengals here, well, in December, when the in-season show rolls out, and this show will start December 3rd, I'm not really focused about with the Dolphins or the Cardinals. And guess what? America wasn't either. And I think that's why they're doing what they're doing now, because the whole AFC North element of it is really interesting. I had a feeling, we'll say, and our insiders had they didn't know, but there was a nugget there that something was coming down. And I forgot, I got to be honest, that they decided to switch it to divisions. And so for a little bit of time, I was thinking it was just the Bengals. And I'm like, man, I think I would prefer it that way, by the way. But because do I really need to watch Rashad Bateman running routes and catching passes in training camp from Lamar Jackson? Like, do we need to do that? Well, we're going to, because you got to follow the show now. It's part of the job. It comes with the territory. But it is exciting. I think there are some downfalls, which we'll get to, or some questions. But overall, more coverage of Joe Burrow, more coverage of Jamar Chase, more opportunity to discuss the internal workings of the Cincinnati Bengals and see the interior workings of the Cincinnati Bengals. Sign me up.
There's so many things that are fascinating about this in-season Hard Knocks. Bengals fans, of course, at least long-term Bengals fans that have been around since before Joe Burrow became the quarterback of the team. Not to call you out for being bandwagoners, just because maybe that's when you came of age as a Bengals fan, are familiar with Hard Knocks, the Bengals previously appearing on the show, winning the division, in fact, in the 2 years they appeared on the show, the training camp version of the show, the traditional version of Hard Knocks back in the Marvin Lewis era. So this will be their 3rd appearance. There, like I said, a few things that are very interesting about this. One,
you better kiss the baby.
Yeah, I mean, they had some iconic moments on that show. Chad
on
Johnson
both.
And Marvin Lewis speeches, and yeah, and
09 and 13. I mean, Giovanni Bernard's minivan. He's driving his.
Yeah,
I think future mother-in-law at the time is his minivan. His mother-in-law, like hilarious, just hilarious.
Yeah, a couple things that are interesting about this to me. One is they must have changed a rule or made some exception, because there are several playoff teams that will be part of this now. And I don't know what the rules were for appearing on in-season Hard Knocks. There are rules around what teams are exempt from having to appear on the training camp Hard Knocks, but they have an entire division involved. And that obviously includes previous year playoff teams. That's really interesting. How are they going to split the time between the teams? And like you said, this doesn't start until late in the season. That's when a lot of the AFC North, and I wonder if this went into scheduling, actually. now that I think about it. A lot of these AFC North teams don't start playing their AFC North games until very late in the season this year. Not just the Bengals. I know that I've seen fans and writers for other teams in the division discussing this point as well.
Yep.
That's got to be intentional. So you're going to have a lot of interdivisional games and drama late in the season for the show to cover. That's very interesting to me. Article on Bengals.com points out that the teams get to screen the episodes to make sure they're not inadvertently leaking proprietary information, team secrets. I thought that was really interesting. So before you even get to the excitement about it, I do think it's really cool. I think that there are these very intriguing aspects of it that maybe only are interesting to me, James.
No, I think that the AFC North element is a good point. Remember when we were like, man, they don't play an AFC North game till week 5. And it's unique. That's all. And it's not something that usually happens that way. They play Pittsburgh for the first time in December, 2 days before the first episode of Hard Knocks airs of in season with the AFC North. So I want to say it's by design to an extent. It's got to be.
I mean, Pittsburgh's first AFC North game period is November 17th, week 11. That's insane. And then they go Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Philly, Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati. So out of their last whatever games, all but 2 AFC North games.
And the other element here, you want this division to be relevant, right? Of course you do if you're the NFL. Well, the AFC North beats the hell out of each other. We know that. I mean, there's no secret there that what happens in these AFC North games. Even when the Bengals were winning the division, they were slugfest games. And so that's a huge element of it. So yeah, push as many as you can into the back end of the season. When the show's on, tie them together to where you watch Hard Knocks and then you watch an AFC North matchup that following Sunday. Or you watch a matchup that Sunday, and guess what? I bet you they will advertise when the Bengals and Steelers are playing on December 1st, I believe it is, that December 3rd is the debut of Hard Knocks, and you get to see Joe Burrow as he gets ready for the season because it's going to start in training camp, and then it'll go all the way through. So, yeah, I think that element, we could talk about the other stuff, the screening stuff and everything. I'm not overshadowing anything you said, but the schedule impact, I don't think that's coincidental. The NFL takes too long, spends too much time, and they're trying to save a show here, I think, with this in-season Hard Knocks. So they're trying to make it work. They know that there's a market for it, and I agree with that. So you got to find the right cocktail of teams, of reality TV mixed with NFL. The Cardinals weren't it. The Colts weren't it. And I'm missing one of the teams that was on there. But maybe this division format is going to be much better.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the schedules, the last interesting thing about the schedules there that I'll point out is that the Bengals have 3 AFC North games from December 1st on. You mentioned the Pittsburgh game on December 1st. Ravens only have 2. The Steelers have 6, and the Browns have 3. Somehow the Steelers got all of their AFC North games well, I guess it's from November 7th on. But the Steelers have a ton of AFC North games in the back part of the schedule, which is a pretty wild bit of scheduling from the NFL to get all those games packed into the back of the schedule. So
they should start off pretty strong, right? Potentially for them.
I mean, it's not their MO typically, but every year is a little bit different. They take different paths to 9-8 every year.
It's your shot. You're taking a shot at them. I'm not doing that.
I mean, is that not true? It's a different path to 9-8 every year, or 8-8 before they added an extra game.
And Justin Fields completes it, and the Steelers are 9-8 again.
Would you be shocked?
Bro, the headlines this week, did you see TJ Watt saying how he really needs a playoff win?
Yeah,
crazy how things change.
One of the longer playoff win droughts in the NFL, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Don't make me call Tim Tebow, Jake.
I think there's a little bit more on this hard knocks topic. We will stay there for a little bit coming up in just a minute.
Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. And right now, baseball season is in full swing. You're probably going to be hanging out at the banks and you're thinking, should I go watch the Cincinnati Reds? Well, yeah, a day at the ballpark is awesome. And so is the Game Time app, because it's going to help you get into Great American Ballpark for less and watch the Reds, or get into Great American Ballpark when Thomas Rhett is here later this summer. Or maybe you want to go to the Luke Combs concert in August. I'll see you there. Also, you could get your tickets to any live event you're looking for with Game Time. They have last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee. I've used Game Time. You'll love it. It is quick. It is easy. And the best part, they have all in prices. You know exactly what you're going to pay. There's no hidden fees. And they also have views from your seat, a panoramic view. So maybe you are going to a concert at a baseball venue and you need to figure out what the best seat is. Game Time will help you do that. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
James, before we finish up on the Hard Knocks topic, just a reminder for all of the everydayers out there, we're currently on a 3-day-a-week schedule on Locked On Bengals. This will continue until probably that week before training camp, unless there are pressing news items that we need to get out, extra podcasts for you. And the typical schedule for those will be releasing Sunday night, Tuesday night, Thursday night to get you through Monday, Wednesday, Friday commutes. If you listen the next day in the morning after we release these episodes, typically around 7 p.m. Eastern time. And if you need a little bit more, you can check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. It's on YouTube. It's on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. And there is more coverage on the Locked On network for you there if you're looking for it. And back to the AFC North in-season Hard Knocks topic. You mentioned only 3 teams have been on the in-season version of the show before. The Indianapolis Colts, the Arizona Cardinals, Miami Dolphins are the 3. This year, there are 2 premieres.
So I forgot the Colts, or did I just keep forgetting to name all 3 in a row? Either way.
I don't remember. The Colts were the first team in 21, then the Cardinals, then Miami in 2023. The AFC North, the first all-division team, of course, we talked about that. They also premiered an off-season show for the New York Giants. That was new for Hard Knocks as they continue to expand their repertoire. And one thing that stands out to me from a football perspective, and I'm not saying this is causal at all, no team that has appeared on any version of Hard Knocks in the history of the show has won the Super Bowl. That is a pessimistic statistic. That is something that speaks to a potential distraction or just the coincidence and difficulty of winning a Super Bowl. One team out of 32 or one team out of 32 wins the Super Bowl every year, and it's just hard to pick that team for Hard Knocks. The Bengals, however, did win the division both times in the past where they appeared on the show. You mentioned 2009, 2013, the seasons 5 and 8 of Hard Knocks. The Bengals did go on to win the division. So there's this negative idea that, well, none of these teams has ever won a Super Bowl. And then there's the Bengals specific history back from Marvin Lewis where they won the AFC North those years. Obviously, there will be 4 teams on the in-season version, so one of them will win the AFC North. But there is a possibility that there could be some distraction associated with Hard Knocks being present and the additional time that somebody on the team will take to screen the episodes. Maybe they somehow keep this out of the main decision makers on the team and get this to a lower level staffer. But the potential for distraction, James, where's your concern level, I guess, from 1 to 10? For me, it's pretty low, like 2, 3. Like, I'm not very concerned about it, but it is something that exists.
It will take a while before it gets to Zac Taylor. And do you want this in or do you not want this in? Someone else is going to be watching it.
Yeah.
And then no. Hey, Zach, you sure? All right. No. You know, I wouldn't shock me if he doesn't see the actual episodes until after they air. That doesn't mean they don't review them, but from a distraction standpoint, in the world of Instagram Reels and social media, and like all these players are used to it. Like I don't really think it's going to matter. I think part of why a Super Bowl champ hasn't been crowned with Hard Knocks, usually they're crappy teams, right? Usually they are. Now the Bengals, some exceptions. Carson was coming off of that injury in 08. Chad was hurt in 08. They were really bad in 08. And they come back and they're a pretty darn good team in 09. 2012 Bengals going into 2013, they were one of the young and up and coming teams. And so they were good. But some of these teams you look at, and of course, I think there's obvious reasons why they struggled. You could easily get the Super Bowl champion this year with the in-season Hard Knocks, because I think there's at least two realistic Super Bowl contenders in the AFC North. It's easily the best division in football. I don't know how you look at this division or look at the AFC and not think Baltimore and Cincinnati have a real shot at winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Bottom line is best division in football, heated rivalries. If you're going to do a division, that's a great division to do it in. The first division, right? Ever to have all 4 teams finish with their winning record last year.
I believe you're right. Obviously they did. And it's wild to think about that the Bengals finished in 4th and they somehow got to 9-8.
It is an interesting note about the quality of the teams. When Hard Knocks started, that was after with the Ravens back in 2001. That was the year after they won a Super Bowl. The Rams were on the show a couple of times in the years preceding, in 2016, 2020, in the years preceding the Bengals Rams Super Bowl in 2021. But then they also had the 2018 Browns and the 2019 Raiders, and they obviously last year had the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, and then Aaron Rodgers got hurt in 22. They were a little bit early on the Detroit Lions, although that was good TV. They were a little bit early on the Detroit Lions making a playoff run. So a bit of interesting history there.
Yeah. Speaking of history, you know who's a Hard Knocks veteran?
Go ahead.
Not just Marvin Lewis, Zac Taylor. Zac Taylor was in Hard Knocks in 2012. And if you go back as a member of the Miami Dolphins coaching staff, if you go back, Chad Johnson was on that team very briefly. He got caught, all of those things. And Joe Philbin made me mad for that. But the thing that, and I remember seeing this clip semi-recent, the past couple of years, Chad goes in and he's trying to be old Chad, where he's bothering coaches and trying to get his old swagger back after that down year in New England. You can sense it. And he interrupts a coaching meeting, and you see Zac Taylor, and it's young Zac Taylor. He's probably like 30, 31, whatever. I do the math. He's probably late 20s actually. But Zac Taylor in the frame with Chad during Hard Knocks. So he's used to it. Won't be a distraction to him. But that's a perfect example. That was like a 3-way quarterback competition in Miami. They had no chance. That Ryan Tannehill was a rookie. They had no chance of winning the Super Bowl. David Garrard was there. I forget the other quarterback, but sometimes they're just, you're looking at the NFL infrastructure without necessarily covering a contender. And this year, with this in-season Hard Knocks, I think for the first time in a while, you have some contending teams that we'll be seeing on a weekly basis.
I think they've had some contenders. They haven't had 4 teams, which I think is a safe way to make sure you have at least one, if not 2, like you mentioned, 1 or 2 contenders featured on the show. I do think it's really cool. I think for all of the hand-wringing over potential distraction and whatever it is, the extra scrutiny on the team and how the team will deal with extra scrutiny, you're right. I think they're mostly used to it. I don't think, and Hard Knocks has been doing this for a long time. I don't think that it should be a major factor, but then we also just get an additional look behind the curtain at all 4 of these AFC North teams. And my personal approach to watching this when we get there in December is probably going to be to fast forward a lot of the non-Bengals parts of the show. Personally, I don't know that I'll be that interested enough in these other teams to
wearing
endure
purple.
it. I am wearing purple. It doesn't mean anything about the Ravens. I'm going to watch the Bengals bits, and unless the other teams are like struggling and I want to feel some schadenfreude and enjoy that struggle, I will probably be fast forwarding some of the rest. That's just my personal approach.
I get it. I do.
Coming up next, James, let's discuss why Jamar Chase was limited in minicamp. A question that's been out there, a question that Zac Taylor answered before minicamp wrapped, and we haven't gotten a chance to talk about. We'll do that today.
Bengals wide receiver Jamar Chase, who happens to be in Paris as of the time of recording this, showed up to mandatory minicamp last week, and he did about as much as, well, you would have, Jake, if you showed up to mandatory minicamp. He did a little bit more, I would say, than the Bengals beat, but not much. He went through install, went through the walkthrough period. And just to give people an idea, usually in season, the walkthroughs are in the morning, like for training camp. The walkthrough will be in the morning, and then you'll have the actual practice where you go out and execute all of those things in the afternoon. Well, during these minicamp days, you have one session. So it's walkthrough, stretching, practice. Jamar went through walkthrough, obviously stretched some, didn't take place in any of the individual drills, which we've talked about. We talked about a little bit last week. And let's start with Zac Taylor. Here was Zac Taylor on Jamar's participation, lack thereof, all of the above when it comes to number one.
Yeah, it was good to get him back in here. He's in great shape. He had his process he went through with Joey Bose. Again, when someone's not been here, you don't want to rush him into things. But he clearly has done a great job this offseason. Really happy to get him back in the building. He was in all the meetings, did all the walkthroughs and all that stuff, and then did a great job mentoring some of the other players as he was out there during practice. So I thought we got what we needed out of him, and was appreciative of him of even though it is mandatory. I mean, you see it's not, there's still guys that aren't always there, and he showed up and did everything that we talked about him doing.
That sounds a whole lot like what I speculated about when we did discuss this on the show last week. There was always a chance, and Zac Taylor could also be saying this to cover for Jamar. This would be exactly what you would say if you were trying to cover, and there was some other reason that he wasn't participating fully in these minicamp practices. But there was always a chance that it was just the Bengals hadn't seen him all offseason and didn't want him to immediately hit the ground and be sprinting and doing all these things before they had their conditioning, their version of, not to say that he wasn't in good shape. Like Zac Taylor said, he's in great shape, but they do have their own plans to get guys acclimated to football activity specifically, and their own approaches to trying to minimize lower body soft tissue injury, which is a big point of emphasis throughout the NFL. You don't want to get hamstring issues. You don't want to get calf issues in the offseason program early in training camp, as we've seen impact this team and many others in the NFL. So it could have always been as simple as that, and it could be as simple as that. And that's what Zac Taylor is selling, at least there in that clip.
I don't buy it, because individual drills are the easiest. Like, that's something that everyone does. And he'll do that on day one of training camp. Like, everybody does. And so there's never really a time, unless you're coming off of injury, where you don't go through those, because it's basic routes. You're not really running full. And I get the team stuff, the 7-on-7, fine, makes sense. Get these young guys reps. But I think they clearly, and at the end there, Zac talked about it. There was a plan. And while Zac is focusing on the conditioning part of it, and it is a factor, I don't think he's lying. Of course, you're not going to bring him in and then have Jamar run a bunch of go balls in 7-on-7. I get it. But I think he's using that and saying, well, we're not going to do that, and making it bigger than it is. I think in a realistic world, like T. Higgins will do individual drills the moment he reports for training camp. Like, that's the most basic thing ever. Like, I don't even know what to equate it to. It's as basic as stretching for these receivers. So I think it's a little more than that. I don't think it's anything. Jamar's doing way more than that on his own, so it's not a big deal. But I don't buy that it's as simple as Zac and Joey Bose and all these guys are like, no, let's hold off Jamar and hold him out of individual drills.
So what would it be? You're saying it's nothing, but it's not nothing, and it's something, but it's not something. So what are we speculating? Because I'm not really sure where.
When has Jamar not taken place? He did individuals last year.
I'm just saying I don't know where the discontent would be if this is a discontent issue.
I don't think it's a discontent thing. I think it's I'm here, but I'm not going to fully participate for whatever reason. But it isn't. I mean, I can speculate about the reasons or the contract or all those things. I don't know, but it isn't conditioning. It isn't. They will all do it on day one of training camp. So what?
And so will Jamar. So what's the point of not doing it in minicamp and like what's the distinction and all these things? I don't really get it.
That's what I'm asking.
I don't have an answer.
And so that's what that's all I'm saying, because individuals are getting loose and working on your footwork, and like it's really, especially at minicamp, it's not like you have Troy out there intensely telling you, all right, stop on a dime right here, turn really hard. Like they'll ramp up to that, but that wasn't this past week. That's all I'm saying. Again, is it anything? You're right. It's not. I just don't think it's as simple as saying the Bengals wanted to get their hands on him and that's it. Like I just don't. Now maybe it is. Maybe I'm dead wrong. That just Jamar could run every individual drill backwards and catch every pass with his left hand and it not impact him at all. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
I'm just not sure what else it would be personally. Obviously, you could speculate, and we don't want to speculate too much, but truth probably somewhere in the middle there between that. There's something small and
Why did Trent Brown go through everything?
well, I talked about that actually when I speculated on this last week, is that you're not necessarily exerting as hard, but then you made the point about individuals after that not requiring a ton of exertion. Not to say that offensive linemen don't exert, but in minicamp with the limitations on contact, there's typically not as much. I would imagine there's not quite as much physical demand in the short area movements of the offensive line versus the longer running that wide receivers are subject to.
I think they probably had a conversation ahead of time. And Jamar said he was going to show up, and they agreed that he just wasn't going to do much, period.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Because again, like I wish I had video to show right now. It's so like most of our listeners probably would be able to go through individual drill. It's not, you're just running 10 yards and stopping and turning. Like it's normal stuff. Now you wouldn't look like Jamar, but there's really not much risk, if any risk, for injury. Injured players that don't play go through it, like I mentioned last week. So that's all. And who cares? It doesn't matter. It's June. I don't need to see Jamar Chase run routes. He's ran 1,000+ routes this offseason. I'm sure he's fine.
If we see this linger into training camp, maybe we discuss it as an issue and start speculating about why the participation is limited, if it is limited for a significant run in training camp. Training camp does have a ramp up period as well. That full schedule available, by the way, it's out there. And James and I were trying to figure out when the padded practices start, so I can try to figure out when I can hopefully make it down to Cincinnati for training camp this year. But if it is still a topic, then we'll talk about it then. Until then, I don't really see anything to wring hands over here other than just revisiting the topic, because it was something that we were asking about last week. Zac Taylor talked about it after we recorded, and we wanted to get back to it with the Zac Taylor quote.
And he may deep down not want to potentially risk any type of injury at a team function when contract talks should be starting now, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they should be picking up at some point. His agent is
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be that simple, which is fine. Like you don't want to be negotiating a $100+ million deal with a ton of money guaranteed if you tweak your hamstring on company time. Right? I mean, so again, I don't know, but I would understand that logic if that's what it is.
Yeah, it could be as simple as contract talks are beginning, which would be good news.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking throughout the offseason about the fact that Jamar Chase wanted to wait to see what the top of this wide receiver market did. We talked about what the top of the wide receiver market did in an episode specifically focused on what Jamar Chase's contract could look like following the Justin Jefferson deal. That was, I think, a couple of weeks ago now. You can find that anywhere you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.